I run every morning, not for the fitness, not for the Instagram, not even to train for a race. I run because it clears my head. It helps me think. It helps me breathe. And my favorite place to run, the forest trail just beyond Willow Creek Road, a quiet path untouched by the sprawl of suburban development. Trees older than my grandfather. Morning light slicing through the leaves like gold. Birds chirping. The occasional deer off in the distance. Peaceful. Sacred. It's also private property, owned by my family for over 50 years, but open to the public because that's how my grandfather wanted it. Let people touch peace, he used to say. So we never fenced it off. We just asked that people respect it. Most did until she came along. It was a Sunday, early, the kind of morning where the mist still clings low to the ground and the world hasn't fully woken up yet. I was 2 miles into my run, earbuds in, hoodie up, zoning out to Coltrane and the rhythm of my breath. That's when I saw them. 3 women standing in the middle of the trail, arms crossed, blocking the path like they were TSA agents for Mother Nature, all white, all around 50-ish. One had a bright pink fleece, another wore oversized sunglasses, and the third, front and center, had a short blonde bob, a Starbucks cup, and that look. You know the look. She stepped forward before I could even slow down. "Excuse me," she barked. "What are you doing here?" I pulled out my left earbud. "Sorry?" "You can't be here," she said, arms folded tighter. "This trail is not open to the public. It's a private community path." I blinked. "Actually, it's—" "No," she snapped. "You need to leave. Now." Behind her, the woman in sunglasses nodded, whispering something. The third one pulled out her phone. My heart started beating harder, and not from the running. "I've been running here since I was a kid," I said, keeping my voice calm. "My family owns this land. My grandfather—" And she cut me off again. "Sure you do." Her tone said it all. I looked down at myself. Hoodie, joggers, sweat-soaked shirt, black skin. She saw a threat. I saw history repeating. "I'm calling the police," she said, turning on her heel like it was a victory move. "You're trespassing, and I will press charges." That's when I made the decision to record. I took out my phone and hit record. "You're calling the police on a man jogging on his own land?" Karen, yes, her name turned out to be Karen, which felt almost too on the nose, spun around. "You don't own this land," she snapped like she was insulted by the idea. "You think you can just claim forest property because you've been here once or twice. Do you live in the neighborhood?" "No," I said. "My family owns this land. My grandfather's name is on the deed." "Yeah, right," she scoffed. "We'll see what the police think." And with that, she stepped off the trail, hand to her ear, giving a dramatic play-by-play to the 911 dispatcher. She described me as aggressive, possibly armed, and following young women through the woods. The other 2 women clutched each other like extras in a soap opera. Meanwhile, I just stood there, recording, heart pounding. You never really understand what it's like to be falsely accused until you're staring down the barrel of a made-up story aimed directly at your life. And for what? For running or sweating, for being Black in a place she thought I didn't belong. But here's what Karen didn't know, what she never even considered. This forest, my family bought it in 1968 from a white landowner who told my grandfather, "You're the only colored man I'd trust not to ruin it." Yeah, that was the compliment he got with the deed. My grandfather took that insult, turned it into legacy, and made damn sure no one would ever take this land from us. And now, here I was, his grandson, being treated like a criminal on the very path he built by hand. As the distant sound of sirens started to creep in through the trees, I took a breath, steadied myself, and said quietly into the camera, "She has no idea who she's messing with." By the time the squad car rolled up to the trailhead, Karen had fully transformed from suburban jogger to Oscar-worthy victim in distress. She stood near the road, waving both arms like she was guiding in a 747, breathless and dramatic. "That's him," she gasped as the officer stepped out of the cruiser. "He's still back there. He wouldn't leave. He followed us. I, I don't feel safe." The officer's hand hovered near his holster as he scanned the woods. Then he saw me, standing still, calm, recording. "Sir," he called out, "step this way, please." I walked forward slowly, my phone still recording but held down to avoid escalating things. "Officer," I said evenly, "there's been a misunderstanding." He held up a hand. "Let's keep our hands visible, all right?" I nodded and lifted both palms. "Not a problem." Karen chimed in again. "He was threatening us. I think I saw something in his pocket, like a knife or maybe something worse. He was circling us in the woods." Circling them? I was jogging. They were the ones blocking the trail like some HOA certified security patrol. "Name?" the officer asked. "Isaiah Walker." He glanced at Karen. "You said he matched a description?" "Yes," she said quickly. "He was lurking around here last weekend, too. You might want to check if he has a record." And there it was. The insinuation, the casual weaponization of race, the not so subtle suggestion that I must been in trouble with the law before because I was black and near trees without a picnic basket. I took a slow breath and reached into my pocket very carefully and pulled out my wallet. "Inside," I said, "is my ID and a copy of the land deed." He raised an eyebrow. "Deed?" I nodded. This land, this forest, is owned by my family since 1968. My grandfather bought it and left it to us in his will. It's private property." That stopped him. For a beat, the air went quiet except for a crow cackling off in the trees. Karen scoffed behind him. "That's ridiculous. If his family owned this land, don't you think we'd know?" The officer looked at me. "Mind showing me that deed?" I handed it over. He unfolded it, eyes scanning the document, taking his time. His partner had arrived by then, standing nearby, watching both Karen and me. I saw her eyes narrow as she looked at my phone, still recording. "I also have digital copies filed with the county," I added. "Tax records, maintenance logs, everything." Karen stepped forward. "He's making that up. He's just trying to intimidate us. That's fake. You can print that off Google." "Ma'am," the second officer cut in, her voice firmer, "you made a call stating there was a threat in progress, that someone was stalking and potentially armed. So far, we haven't found any evidence of that." Karen turned red, stammering, I felt threatened. That's how it seemed to me." "Feeling threatened," the officer said, "does not give you the right to falsely accuse someone of a crime, especially on property you don't have permission to be on." Karen blinked. "Excuse me?" "Ma'am," the first officer said, glancing down at the deed again. "This document lists the property lines. You're standing about 20 yards inside those lines right now. That means you're trespassing." The silence that followed was delicious. Karen opened her mouth like she was about to protest, but for once, no words came out. The other women behind her started to back away slowly, like raccoons realizing the garbage can they were raiding actually belonged to a bear. I looked at the officers. "I'd like to formally request that they be removed from the premises and, if necessary, cited for trespassing and false reporting." The first officer looked to his partner, who gave a short nod. "We can do that." Karen exploded. "This is insane. He's making this a race thing." The second officer calmly replied, "Ma'am, you're the one who called 911 and described the suspect as a large black male stalking women in the forest. That's a very specific and serious accusation." Karen froze. The officer turned back to me. "Do you want to press charges?" I paused, looked at Karen, looked at her friends, now suddenly silent, eyes to the ground, like high school kids caught cheating on a math test. "I want this on the record," I said, "and I want them off this land immediately. If they come back, I will press charges." The officers nodded. Karen and her entourage were escorted off the property, not quite in handcuffs, but close enough to feel the humiliation. I stayed behind, phone still recording, heart pounding, not from fear anymore, but adrenaline. Because in that moment, I realized something. She thought I didn't belong, but she was standing on my land. And I had every right, every legal, every moral, every ancestral right to be there. You'd think that getting escorted off someone else's land by the cops would be enough to humble a person. Not Karen. The very next day, I got an email. It was written in Comic Sans, because of course it was, and sent from oakridgecommunitywatch@gmail.com, an account she clearly made that morning. Subject line: "A warning about false land claims in Willow Forest Trails." She had the audacity to accuse me of lying about my family's ownership, claiming that I had created forged documentation to manipulate law enforcement, and that my presence on the trails was disruptive and potentially dangerous to families. She even signed it, "Sincerely, a concerned citizen and longtime trail lover." I didn't reply. I didn't have to, because what Karen didn't know, what she never bothered to learn, was that I had already contacted my family's attorney the night of the incident. And by the time she hit send on that email, she'd already stepped into deeper legal waters than her fake HOA newsletter could bail her out of. My lawyer filed a formal complaint with the county about the false police report. He also had copies of everything: the deed, the 911 call transcript, the body cam footage, and my video recording, which I'd quietly uploaded to my private YouTube account. Facebook. At first, it got a few hundred views, and someone reposted it to Reddit under the title, "Karen calls cops on black jogger in her forest." Gets educated by deed owner. And that's when it blew up. By the end of the week, the video had over 600,000 views. Local news picked it up, then a national blog. Next thing I know, I'm getting emails from journalists, lawyers, and people across the country thanking me for staying calm, for standing my ground, for owning the moment, literally and figuratively. Karen, on the other hand, was cooked. The county fined her for false reporting and abuse of emergency services. Not a slap on the wrist either, a real fine, 4 digits. But that wasn't the worst part for her. The worst part was the shame. Because now every time she stepped outside, she wasn't Karen from the HOA or Karen the trail regular. She was Karen from the video, the one who weaponized the police against a black man just trying to jog. The one who got caught, the one who got served by the very law she tried to manipulate. She tried to explain it away, of course, said she was just being cautious, that the trail wasn't clearly marked private, that she felt unsafe, but nobody bought it. Even her friends, the 2 women with her that day, publicly distanced themselves. One of them messaged me anonymously to apologize and said she was uncomfortable the whole time, but didn't know how to speak up.
And the cherry on top? I requested a no trespass order against Karen and her friends. The judge approved it without hesitation. They are now legally barred from stepping foot on any part of the property my family owns, which includes the entire trail system they use to walk every Saturday. You should have seen the look on Karen's face when she was served those papers at her front door. Didn't see it in person, but the delivery guy was a neighbor of mine. He texted me one word after. Delicious. I kept jogging. Every morning. Same trail, same rhythm. But now, people wave. Some stop to say thanks. One guy even brought his kids out and told them, "This is Mr. Walker. He owns this land. He stood up for himself the right way." And I realized something powerful. For years, people like Karen had walked through my forest acting like they owned it, like it was theirs to gatekeep, like my existence in that space needed their approval. But the truth? The forest doesn't belong to them. It belongs to us, to everyone who's ever been made to feel like they didn't belong in nature, in community, in America. This land is mine. But the message is bigger than deeds and property lines. It's about presence. It's about taking up space that you earned, that your ancestors fought for, that your grandfather worked his entire life to protect. Karen tried to erase me from the story. Instead, she became the footnote. By the second week after the video went viral, Karen had stopped showing her face on the trail or anywhere near it. She was laying low, probably hoping it would all blow over, probably praying the internet would find a new villain to roast and move on. But real life isn't like the internet. Some consequences don't fade after 48 hours. Some get hand-delivered in a manila envelope by a process server named Reggie, who takes great joy in saying, "You've been served." The no trespass order was just the beginning. See, I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't interested in petty payback or public shaming. That was already happening on its own. What I did want was accountability. Because Karen hadn't just embarrassed herself, she'd put me in danger. When you call 911 and lie about a suspicious black man stalking women in the woods, you're playing Russian roulette with someone's life. I got lucky. I kept my hands visible. I stayed calm. I had proof. But what if I hadn't? What if the responding officer had been jumpy? What if that one false accusation had cost me more than an afternoon of humiliation? So, with the help of my lawyer and a very motivated civil rights organization, we filed an official complaint. Abuse of emergency services, racially motivated harassment, and defamation. Karen got the notice on a Thursday. She didn't open the door. Reggie slid it through the mail slot. By Friday, her husband had taken down her Facebook account. By Saturday, her name was trending again, this time on a blog that interviewed me about property, prejudice, and peace. And then came the cherry on top. That weekend, I held an event, just a small one, a community day in the forest. Nothing political, just people, black, white, Latino, Asian, kids with chalk, parents with strollers, elders who'd grown up nearby and hadn't set foot on the trails in years. I brought in a food truck, a local jazz band set up on a patch of grass near the clearing. We handed out flyers about the history of the land, how my grandfather had purchased it in the late 60s when black ownership of anything outside city lines was still considered a miracle or a threat, sometimes both. People asked questions. They listened. They respected the place. They respected me. One older man pulled me aside and said, "You know, this is the first time I've ever felt safe walking these woods." I nodded. That's exactly why I'm doing this. Now here's where it gets real good. About midway through the afternoon, while I was helping a kid find his lost water bottle near the trailhead, I saw a familiar SUV creeping past the edge of the property. Windows up, engine idling. Karen. She didn't come in, she just watched. Watched the people laughing, watched the food truck line, watched me standing on the land she tried to ban me from. And I swear I could feel the embarrassment oozing through the glass. I raised my hand and gave her a little wave. She drove off. She hasn't been back since. A few days later, I got word that she'd agreed to settle the civil complaint out of court. No apology, of course. Karen doesn't do apologies. But her attorney sent over a statement acknowledging a misunderstanding had occurred and that she would respect the boundaries of Mr. Walker's property going forward. Fine by me. I wasn't expecting remorse, just results. As for the fine from the county, paid. Quietly. But not quietly enough to stop the HOA gossip chain from whispering it through every cul-de-sac in town. And me? I kept running. Every morning. Same time. Same path. Only now, I wasn't alone. More and more people began using the trail, respectfully, gratefully. A few would nod, some smiled. Some said, "Thank you," and kept moving. And slowly, the land began to feel like what it always should have been. Shared, peaceful, and free from fear. Karen tried to gatekeep a forest that didn't belong to her. She thought her voice was louder than truth, louder than history. But deeds don't lie, and neither does legacy. A month after the incident, after the lawsuit was settled, the fines were paid, and Karen's face had been memed into internet history, I stood at the trailhead with a post-hole digger and a custom-made sign leaning against my truck bed. It was early. Mist still curled around the trees like a blanket, the earth soft under my boots. My forest was quiet again. Still, just how I liked it. But that morning wasn't just about quiet. It was about claiming space. See, my grandfather didn't just buy this land. He preserved it, maintained it, made sure it stayed a haven when the world outside got loud and mean. He taught me how to walk its paths without disturbing the soil, how to listen when the wind changed, how to respect something older than any of us. But no one had ever put that into words. So I did. 2 hours later, the sign stood tall at the head of the main trail. Not flashy, just wood, clean lettering, and a message that felt like truth etched into bark. Walk respectfully. Leave no hate behind. This forest belongs to the Walker family. And to all who come in peace. I stepped back, hands on my hips, and looked at it. No fences, no gates, no bans. Just boundaries, clearly defined. Honor the land, honor the people on it. Simple. By noon, folks started trickling in. It was a Saturday, and ever since the Karen incident, as it had come to be known, more families had started using the trail. Some who'd lived nearby for decades and never felt welcome before. One woman told me it was the first time her teenage son felt safe jogging alone. Another said her daughter brought a sketch pad and liked to draw by the stream. That afternoon, someone brought flowers and placed them beside the sign. No card, no name. Didn't need one, 'cause it wasn't about me. It never really was. It was about the people like me who'd been told, subtly or not, that they didn't belong in certain places. That the world had borders invisible to some, but enforced for others. That being black in nature was somehow suspicious. Karen had tried to make me disappear from my own land. Instead, she disappeared from it. And I stayed. I still remember the last time I saw her, weeks later, at a grocery store. She was pushing a cart, hair pinned tight, sunglasses on inside like she was ducking paparazzi. We locked eyes. Just for a second. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to, because the forest had already spoken. And whether she knew it or not, it had told her one thing, loud and clear. You don't own everything you step on. Sometimes the ground fights back. I still run that trail every day. Still past the place where it all happened. And every time I do, I glance at that sign and smile. Because it reminds me of something that can't be taken away, shouted down, or scared off. Belonging isn't granted. It's rooted, like trees, or like legacy, like me. Moral of the story? If someone ever tells you that you don't belong in a space your ancestors built, just smile, stand tall, and remind them. Some of us don't need permission to be here. We've already paid for it. Thanks for watching. If you've ever been told you don't belong, drop your story in the comments. This is a forest for all of us.